My name is Christy Busby, and you are about to listen to the next episode of my podcast called F.A.T.E, From Atheism to Enlightenment. So come on in, join me. We're going to talk about it all, from atheism to enlightenment. Alrighty, guys, here we go. Get ready, and welcome to your F.A.T.E. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of F.A.T.E. How's everybody doing out there? On today's show, I am bringing you psychic medium, author, and returning guest, Carole J. Obley, to the show. We're going to be discussing intuition and how we should be leaning into that, especially in these challenging times. Carole, welcome to your F.A.T.E, my friend. How you doing today?
Hi, Christy. Great.
Hi.
Thanks so
Carole.
much for having me back.
Thank you for joining me. I always enjoy you. You give me such great insight on so many things. And we are living in these interesting times now. And I feel the pull to start talking about it more on my show of how people can start managing their stress, their anxiety, their fears, and what we could be doing to bring some calm. Some insight into how they should be navigating their lives. So, you have a book. It's called The Art of Sensing, a guide for staying true to your soul's journey through challenging times. And I think it's really a great book to dive into if you are seeking any kind of guidance in life right now. But let's kind of reintroduce you to the audience about who you are, what your gifts are, how you're using them today, and all that jazz.
Well, I've been a professional medium for about 3 decades now. I have done over 16,000 readings and a lot of media. And this is my 5th book, actually. I was inspired to write this because of the tremendous intensity that's going on in the collective consciousness right now. And I also think it's really important to why would someone like me have any sort of inside track on writing a book like this? And it's because of my close relationship of working with spirit for so many years. Spirit being my word for higher source, God, whatever you want to call that, it doesn't matter what you call it. It's the universal consciousness that makes up everything here and is throughout our entire cosmos. So one of the things that I've really been inspired to share with people is, and particularly in the art of sensing, no matter what is going on out there in the outer world, external to you as the individual who is spirit, clothed in this physical vehicle that we call a body, you have within you the sanctuary of peace, of right action, right thinking, and the ability of discernment. And, I feel it's so important for people because right now there is an epidemic of anxiety, depression, anger, drug abuse, of escapism. And this is part of the transformational shift that is going on right now. So we can look at that, Christy, and we can go, look at all this division, look at all the chaos, look at everything that's happening out there. And so the key to the art of sensing is, what do I as an individual have to do with that? I don't go out there and I'm not in the streets, or I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. But what people need to understand is that every human being, and I would put animals in there too, although the consciousness is different.
Yeah.
um, is part of the collective. And so we cannot separate or make a distinction between what is going on within us and what's going on out there. And how do we find inner peace? How can I do that? I have so many people in readings, and I've done many, 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 many readings. What is my purpose in life? And lately, a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad that you said, um, basically in the shorter version of what you said is I believe that people don't understand that they truly do have a little bit more control over what's going on in their exterior reality by understanding that it all starts with your inner reality. Your outer reality is a reflection of your inner reality. And I think if more people were to read it with love and creativity and calm and peace and joy, you would see that more show up in the global consciousness. But we don't see that because we are fed so much fear, we're fed so much outrage to keep us in a state of anxiety. And it is just going to create more of that within the global consciousness. You can see it everywhere now. Everybody's outraged, everybody's scared, and it feels like it's ramping up.
Yes, what I would consider, and this is from many years ago when I first started my spiritual journey and studies and work, it's called a healing crisis. So, what is a healing crisis? Well, it is that point that, as you mentioned, of intensity where something's got to give. We have some sort of an eruption, and, just like a wound that is healing in the body, and we see maybe the scabs or the infection coming to the surface. That's what's going on. And that has to happen as a necessary um, stage or phase of the transformative process. In the art of sensing, there's an entire chapter I wrote called The Bridge. So, what is that? Well, the bridge is symbolic. Everybody knows what a bridge is. It moves you from point A to point B. You're traversing something. And so, when we step onto that bridge, we're in the process of transformation. And there are stages to that. And so, if we get stuck in a stage, for example, some of the more common uh, states of mind or emotions that might come up: confusion, sadness, anger, uh, uncertainty, not knowing, well, what direction am I going into? I think a lot of people feel that right now. What direction are we headed into as, we can say in the United States, but we can also say collectively as humanity. And so there has to be necessarily, when we traverse the bridge, and a basic fundamental element of trust that spirit, God, higher source, again, whatever you want to call that, is leading us in the process. Our resistance to that is what creates suffering.
Mhm.
Resistance, as opposed to acceptance, always causes some form of suffering, because we want things to be different than they are, which I believe is human nature. I'm in no way saying that it's wrong to feel like that, because I think that's very human to feel that I don't like this. I want it to be
Right,
different.
right.
But the first step in that is to accept exactly the way things are, let go of the other end of the rope in the tug of war, and follow the inner guidance of what the total book is about, and that's your intuition, which is the voice of the soul.
How would you people call it intuition, they call it your sixth sense, they call it many things, but how would you define exactly what intuition is and how can we start becoming being able to recognize it within ourselves.
Well, there's a spiritual intuition, and that's mainly what I write about in The Art of Sensing. The voice of the soul. Those are the subtle, and a lot of them will be subtle. Sometimes, yes, we get hit over the head. I'm sure you've had that happen. I've had it happen. Pay attention, universal source is saying. But it's often subtle with a prompting or a feeling or a sensing. And that's why I titled the book, The Art of Sensing. This is not just for professional mediums, professional psychics. It's for every human being because it is a God given, God provided resource that each of us has. The problem is that the rational mind comes in and goes, that's nonsense. Because the rational mind is always looking for some sort of whatever thing it can hold in its hand and point to on as proof.
Yeah.
With
Would you
intuition, you're not going to have that.
would you call the rational mind also like the ego, egoic
Yes.
mind? Is that the same thing? Okay, just
Yeah.
checking.
Now, I want everybody to understand in no way am I demonizing the ego, that this is why, one of the reasons why um, I disregard most of these so called New Age teachings because I find that they have demonized the ego. It's not to be demonized, it is a necessary entity in spiritual evolution and spiritual awakening. So some people might be going, why? Why is it essential? Because it provides the element of duality. It provides, we need both. And particularly here on the physical plane, because we have to navigate in the physical world. The ego, upon death, and I've seen this through many years of doing mediumship, will dissolve because it is no longer useful. The spirit world is a place of unity based on the vibration, for lack of a better word, of the soul's consciousness. In other words, Christy, we go to a place in the spirit world upon death that matches the frequency of consciousness that we have at the moment of death.
Oh, that could be good or bad then, huh? Depending on
Yes,
ooh. If you're vibrating at a lower vibrational frequency, does that mean when you pass, you were kinda going to be submerged in that type of environment? Is that what you're saying? Interesting.
yes.
I always thought that whether you were happy, sad, whatever your emotional makeup, your inner being was vibrating at the time, I always thought that that just, kinda dissolved like the ego, and you went into a world filled with love and bliss, and you kinda started remembering who you were, and, all of your worldly kind of hangups in a way melted off of you. But if you're going when you die, if you are still kinda living in those feelings of anger or guilt or shame or whatever, if you know alright, I know this is a little off track, but have you had much interactions with people that when they pass, they have actually lower vibrational experiences, and what are those like? I'm curious now.
Absolutely. Um, let's take an example from my case files of readings. Say a dad who was very abusive to the
Mm.
children, and that was never balanced or healed when the dad was here. So what happens? What happens in a situation like that?
Yeah.
Without my knowing, and again, having any knowledge, I don't ask questions before I do readings. I don't even ask, who do you want to connect with? A genuine medium should not be doing that. But I just tell people, this is who I'm aware of, the evidence given, here's the message. So in an example like this, um, the father coming through in the reading, maybe saying, uh, be offering an apology. I have become aware doing my life review in the spirit world that I was not a good father. In fact, I was pretty bad. So I didn't settle that when I was there on the physical plane. So it must be dealt with now. The reading is simply an opportunity. And there are other ways too. I'm not in any way elevating readings above any other thing that you can do spiritually. It's one tool in the toolbox, but it is quite healing for people to hear finally a redemption, a redemptive message from that father who was terribly abusive, maybe an alcoholic, didn't really care, wasn't there for the family. Um, it's healing for an individual
Yeah.
to receive that type of message. So, one way or another, karma, which is a law, a natural law, it's not just the fantasy land of, well, I don't believe in karma. Well, I'm sorry, but universal laws will never be ignored or subverted. And
Yeah.
the law of karma is a universal law. So, whatever you create, whatever I create in my words, in my actions, the way I treat other people will be returned to me. That's a guarantee. It cannot happen any other way. That is another reason I have turned away from some New Age teachings that say, well, I'm done with karma. I don't need to pay attention to it anymore. Really? I don't think
Yeah.
so. Because unless you are in perfect alignment with the divine consciousness, uh, you are still off center. All of us are in one way or another. And we will see that upon death. This is part of this after death communication that I've written extensively about in my previous books. I'm Still With You, Soul to Soul Connections, Wisdom from the Spirit World. We have to look at the quality of consciousness that we had. It has nothing really to do with organized religion.
Right.
It has to do with morality because
Yep.
natural laws deal with the consequences. And I write a whole chapter on natural laws in the art of sensing so that people can understand them and to live your life through natural law instead of politics or religion or false teachings. You
I mean,
align with natural law, then you're doing well.
I have used natural law now to kind of guide my own life. Rely very heavily on the law of attraction. I try and keep my vibration in at a level at which I'm going to attract good things in my life. I absolutely think about karma a lot more. Like, I have a hard time even killing bugs now. I just do, because every little action that you take in life is going to have some sort of repercussion. So I almost not use it as a life hack, but I definitely am very mindful, much more mindful and cognizant of how I'm feeling, what I'm saying, and all of those things based on not all the natural laws. I mainly rely on the law of attraction, and I'm very cognizant much more of the karmic wheel that we put ourselves on through our own deeds in life. How can people start discerning between their own thoughts? Because I everybody has that voice in their head that speaks to them. Some people have very negative voice in their head speaking to them, talking down to them. Other people don't. I'm blessed. I don't have a voice in my head that tells me I'm ugly or stupid or not good enough. But I do have a voice in my head that I kind of communicate with. How is that my intuition? Is that my inner dialogue? Like, how can people discern, like, who's talking to me? My higher self,
Yeah.
or is that just me?
No, no, I'm very familiar with the voice in the head.
Yeah.
So we all have that. So what is that? It's the mind. It's the mind doing what it was designed to do. And what's that? Think, discern. Um, and that's a great needed resource. However, there is also the voice, the still small voice. We've all heard this expression of the soul. And that will always supersede the ego because its consciousness is really superior to the egoic consciousness. Why? Because the soul, first off, it's eternal. The mind is not. I consider the mind, the brain, actually a step down unit for that we need just here in the physical plane, a step down unit for the soul. And so it's not that we're to ignore it, but our job is to transcend it when we need to feel that sanctuary within, when we need higher guidance. We are not going to have proof that we can point to and going, well, why do you feel that way? I don't know. It's just, I'm feeling that I need to go in this particular direction. I think we've all had the experiences where a door slams shut. We go through a lot of suffering with maybe a loss of a job, loss of a relationship, loss of a friendship, a serious illness, the death of a loved one creates awakening. So the purpose really of the voice in the head is to provide the necessary contrast for us to evolve the root. And that is why it should not be done away with. The problem is, and turn on the news for 5 minutes, you'll see the results of people following the ego without giving any attention to the soul. The problem is, yes, people think that's the be all and end all.
Right.
And it's not. It is part of us. It's just like the body. I'll tell you this real quickly. I used to work out a lot. And in this gym that I went to, the whole one wall was mirrors. And I would be on the Nautilus machines and so forth. And I would look and I would see these usually guys, and they're looking in this mirror, looking at their physique, and looking at their muscles and everything. And I kind of chuckled to myself and I thought, they're believing that you're their physical body. So the body is not to be ignored. That's not the point. We have a body. We've all heard this, but we're not the body. We are not the personality. We have those things. They're very essential. They're not bad, but they are not the ultimate consciousness that each of us is. So as long as we put them in their proper perspective, then we're going to have that nice balance in our life.
Yep, yep, yep. I mean, I think now more than ever, people really do need to start paying attention and tuning into their own inner stillness, their figuring out what their soul purpose is, and much less on relying upon our exterior to fulfill us, to make us happy, to give us guidance, to look for even leadership out there. I think it's lacking. I think that you really need to start finding your own internal truth. What is your soul journey? What resonates with you? What is your inner being calling you to do on this plane? And I think that we have just been trained from the time we come out of the womb to look to other people for guidance, for happiness, for fulfillment. We're obsessed with materialism, all of these things. So, how do you feel one should try and figure out what their sole purpose is? Everybody, from what I understand, everybody is down here for a reason. We're supposed to be learning certain things, we're supposed to be accomplishing what our sole purpose is while we're here, how can one start tapping in and learning and finding some sort of guidance and looking more from their own inner navigation system instead of relying so heavily on letting other people lead them and telling them how to feel or so on and so forth?
Yeah, great question. And in fact, I addressed this in well, probably a couple of my books. The number one regret of dying people, and this came from people who worked in hospice, who heard this, who witnessed it countless times. Not following my own heart. Number one regret, allowing others to dictate what my happiness is. Now, with everything else in life, there's a balance with that. We can't obviously go, well, it makes me happy to go out and murder people or, yeah, harm people or harm animals or whatever. That's not really what this means. It means that we need to follow the inner guidance, again, coming through the vehicle of intuition through promptings, through what are you drawn to? What are you attracted to? What makes you feel alive? What would you do all day long, even if you weren't being paid for it? Okay. That's what people need to understand. And it may not be this lofty, you know, important in the eyes of society type of role. Being a parent, being a caretaker, these are part of that's just two of the multitudes of purposes. And it's an expression of the divine within. So the primary purpose is the expression of spirit from within. And that can take many forms. It doesn't have to be something that society goes, wow, look at him, look at her. I mean, look, they're the CEO of a company, or they're this, or they're that, or they're a model, or they're, whatever it might be in society that we elevate people. First off, we have no idea what's going on within that individual. Very dangerous to judge from the outside. Secondly, purpose, again, is an expression of the divine qualities. You named a few: compassion, generosity, altruism, humanitarianism, service. These are all divine qualities. You are automatically in purpose when you, as the individual, express any of those qualities.
And don't you feel, I know for me personally, I'm kind of on a new journey with this whole podcast, and it really has come together on its own in mysterious ways that I can't quite explain. It just kind of happened, like, flowed like a river out of me. I don't even understand it. And I've been told by other, gifted folks, medium, psychic, astrologists, "Oh, this is what you're supposed to be doing. You were meant to come here and teach people how to love. You're supposed to be doing this. You're a spiritual." And I have to say, I love doing this. I don't get paid to do this. It's growing on its own, and I really believe that if people started to pay more attention to their inner heart and followed that the universe would unfold in the most mysterious ways, and doors would open and opportunities would flow to you. You certainly have a higher degree of being able to tap in and go beyond the veil. Do you feel like that was part of your soul mission here? And how do you personally decide whether you are on the right path, or how did you get on the right path in your own life?
Yeah. Yes, I do feel it is mediumship is a calling, and I don't mean to put it that it's superior at all. You will never hear me saying that. You will never hear me use the word I'm gifted, because I'm so cognizant of ego stepping in. And I happen to be an individual who was born with a sensitivity In my estimation, I know that I know that I know that, and I've studied my own astrology chart. I'm extremely studied in astrology as well as mediumship, that I've done this in previous incarnations. So it was the um, vehicle or circumstance that my soul chose this time to evolve and at the same time help others. And the same with writing. I mean, I always kid people when I go, if you want to write a book, don't quit your day job because you will likely not make a lot of money, doing it. But the important thing is to get the thoughts out, to get the information out there. So my personal um, stepping on to the pathway of mediumship came about through some other people, through an event that took me completely out of what I was doing. And that event was a fire. I was running this was 30 years ago. I was running a business. Overnight, the business burned. It was an electrical fire. And I was left directionless for about 9, 10 months. I said, what the heck am I supposed to be doing here with my life? I recall Christy actually sitting there saying to Spirit, could you just assign a job to me? Like, what am I supposed to be doing here? And it was not in my timing. That's another thing about intuition people need to know. It comes about not in your timing. It comes about in the timing of the soul, which the soul really doesn't know anything about linear time. But when that occurred, I was left with this emptiness. And so again, when we go back to talking about the bridge being symbolic of transition, here I was leaving the past behind, not by my own choice, but by what had occurred. And so it was wake up time for me. And it came in the form of a phone call from, unfortunately, my friend is no longer with us. Terrible accident that took her out. But she called and asked me to come to a metaphysical center in a small town near where I live. And I resisted that. I resisted that because I thought, you know what? I don't need that. I need a job. I need to be earning money. I had some savings I could rely on, but that wasn't good. I mean, knew that I needed to be productive. So reluctantly, after the second phone call, I went. And they practice hands-on healing. I've done many, many years of volunteer hands-on healing, spiritual healing, Reiki healing. I'm a Reiki master. All of that came about because I said, you know what? I'm going to get dressed up. I'm going to go to this place. Now, that was my soul speaking to me. And initially, again, my mind resisted that. And then fortunately, it came back around again, thanks to my friend. Um, so, I mean, that's just my story. All of us can have a story of how we can look at something and we go, oh my God, that was so horrible and terrible. And, like I had this fire and it burned me out of my business. Because then we can look back and go, that was the best thing that ever happened to me.
I feel very strongly that a lot of people don't get that opportunity to get on their path or to um, awaken until they have some sort of traumatic event. I always say you need to be shaken to awaken. You lost your business overnight to a fire and it traumatized and you had a traumatic event. It shook you to your core. And I'm sure not everybody needs a traumatic psychological trauma to initiate awakening. I'm sure it happens all different types of ways. But so many people have the same theme of having some sort of psychological trauma a health crisis, a divorce, a fire, something that shakes them so off of their game that they start just asking questions and going beyond their normal boundaries. There's got to be more to this than, dying at the age of 75 with no money to your name. You know what I'm saying? It just feels like life as we have come to accept it doesn't really make much sense to me. Who are we? What are we doing here? Why are we down here? And how can we get more people to put down their phone and start looking within to find those types of answers?
Agreed. I people think I'm crazy. I have
Me
a
too.
I have a phone that is a flip phone, and it doesn't even get the internet.
Good.
I'm not, no, but see, I have a laptop here, but I see so many people, I mean, and dangerously so, walking in a parking lot, walking across the street, and they're immersed in the phone, and they are totally unaware of the present moment
Yep.
because they're consumed by what is going on digitally.
I
Uh,
mean, it's stealing our very time here on the planet. It's stealing precious moments away from everything from our family to figuring out, like I said, bigger questions in life. I think that the smartphone has been one of the biggest detrimental things that it's happened to humanity in the last decade
I agree.
is I didn't have a cell phone when I was a kid. I was outside playing, being creative, running around in the woods, catching frogs and snakes. I wasn't on my phone inside or playing a video game. Like to me, that feels bizarre. And I feel sorry for the kids these days that have grown up in an environment where they are looking at a screen for 90% of their lives.
Yeah, what I notice, agreed, and I know I'm probably much older than you. When I grew up during the 60s, well, I mean, there wasn't even home computers, right?
Yeah.
When I
Right.
graduated from high school, we had a computer room. It was an elective, you could do, oh, computer science, okay? The thing was huge, this computer. It took up the whole room, and it was the little data cards you entered in there. Um, so I look at, technology as, like money, and I'll tell you why, the analogy, because it's neutral. It can
Mm.
be used for a multitude of things. It can be used I watch a lot of educational videos on YouTube. I watch a lot of things that are educational. So that to me is a good use of technology. And I would also say the interconnection with anybody, any place on the planet we have now. It was unheard of in those days. What's going on in Asia? What's going on in Africa? We had no knowledge of that except what was in the media. So I think, those are the positive points. The dependency is probably the negative of it. And, it's just like with money, it's a piece of paper, a coin, or an electronic form of energy. That's all money is. It can be used to, kill people, or it can be used to, give a bunch of food to people who need food.
Yeah.
So it's really, and here's another aspect of the intuitive life, the intent, the intent that you as the individual puts behind um, your thought, your consciousness is really the driving force. It's the rocket fuel that determines what the outcome of that. See, thought is the original cause because that's another natural law, right? The cause and effect.
Yeah.
For every effect, there is an original cause. Here on the physical plane, that is thought. Thought is cause because everything here was first a thought. Even nature was a thought of spirit. So that's our original cause. You cannot solve any of humanity's problems by addressing it from the level of uh, effect. you have to change necessarily because of the law. You have to change the cause. If you do not change the cause, you're going to get the same manifestation over and over and over again.
We're we're very creative, our, human beings. We'll get there no matter how you slice it. Let's dive a little bit. You talk about in your book, you talk about 12 archetypes that exist in the human consciousness. And I find that um an interesting topic because it's very hard to get people to change who they are. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Is that because when we come down here, we kind of are predetermined to be a certain archetype? Can you talk about what are archetypes and a few examples, and what does that mean for the human consciousness as far as who we are when we get here?
A archetype is an ingrained um, pattern that you will find cross culturally. For example, some archetype: mother, father, child, evil, good. I mean, these are archetypal that have existed. And by the way, Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychoanalyst, wrote an awful lot about archetypes, and that's what's depicted in the tarot. I've studied the tarot also for many, many years. Um, so they're deeply ingrained in human consciousness. And it's not that we are meant to stay in one archetype or another. However, the truth is, from what I've seen through many years of doing metaphysical work, is that the soul can spend many lifetimes learning the expression of one particular archetype or ray. That can also be called a ray. What do I mean? Well, a ray of the divine consciousness. And it's really all one in unity, but there are different shades of that unity. So, for example, you can also, these kind of blend in with soul groups
Yeah.
or soul pods.
Yep.
Um, Healers, for example, people who are in the medical profession, people who are doing work like I'm doing, people in some way who are trying to make a difference in the world by easing hunger, violence. There are the social workers. Um, there are people who are the archetypes of the caregivers. The expression of that naturally flows through them. What I've seen is that a lot of that, usually our predisposition to that, usually follows us in from previous incarnations. So, just as I was saying earlier in the podcast, that I firmly believe that I have done this, meaning intuitive work, mediumistic work, spiritual work in prior incarnations. It's
Yeah.
sort of like I know that in my soul.
Yeah.
When some people will probably admit that too. You don't have to be a medium to say that. Somebody will say, yeah, I just naturally gravitated towards, being a caretaker. I've done
Yeah.
readings for people. They're like, yeah, I took care of my mom when she was ill and dying. I took care of my dad, my brother, or whoever it might be.
Yeah.
So we're sort of inclined to follow that ray or that archetype.
Yep. Yep.
And the
Yep.
tarot depicts these in the suit or in the collection of cards, of which there are 22, and those are the major arcana. Starting with 0, which is the fool, and it doesn't mean fool like a foolish person. It means purity. That was sort of an old English term, the fool, like happy-go-lucky, very childlike, and it represents the innocence of the soul when it's born. All the way up through all the numbers of the major arcana, the stages of the soul's journey here on the physical plane, to the last major arcana, which is the world. And so the major arcana begins with 0, which is a circle, and it ends with a 0, which is the world. So it's circular. And as we work our way through the various archetypes, we will see these expressed at different points in our life. I believe that most people could probably say that they belong to a primary archetype or soul pod, but we can express all different archetypes at any point.
Gotcha. I was under the impression that, like, when we get down here, we have certain biases towards things,
Yes.
which which kinda live in our makeup for the majority of our lives, but, um, I kinda wanna get into some of your stories of communicating with spirits from the other side. Do you have anything to impart to us maybe about, for instance, what's happening, in the world today? Or, is there a great awakening happening or anything that you can tell us about what to expect in general?
I mean, if you look back historically from the beginning of when humans were here, there has always been some sort of big catastrophic thing that has occurred, whether they be war. Most of the time, unfortunately, they've been wars. Um, but famines, plagues, different things that are the catalysts for awakening on some level. Now, I don't know. I couldn't answer that. Is this greater than what's happened in our history?
Mhm.
Probably not. It's just that we're aware of it because of social media, because of the news, because of television, radio. We didn't have those back then. But I really think like we can't make it more than it is, but we need to use it for the opportunity that it's presenting. That's the key.
Is this our global consciousness shaken to awaken moment, you think?
So it is definitely wake up time. Yes.
It is. It is. I'm pulling for humanity. I mean, I think individuals we're creative, we're remarkable creatures that have the capacity of great love, but I think we need to really, I think, start taking our own power back and looking much more within for our own inner truths in order to um become higher vibrational, more loving, more compassionate, more empathetic beings so we can start healing the planet. Because we're in trouble, folks. Things
You
could get
made a
pretty gnarly
really
coming up.
good point before, Christy, about really paying attention to things flowing, okay, in
Yeah.
your life. And this is what I found in my work as a medium. When mountains move, when obstacles are removed, when connections come together, that's when you know you're in flow, you're in synchronicity with the soul's consciousness. When you feel badly about doing something, when things aren't clicking, when you're not with somebody who's supportive of your mission, that's when you know you're out of alignment.
Yes.
So I think that's another thing people can use to know, am I aligned?
Yeah.
Am I listening to the
Yep.
intuition?
Yep.
And you can gauge that by saying, yeah, things are flowing.
Carol, I always enjoy having you on the show. So insightful and super knowledgeable. And if people want to pick up your book, The Art of Sensing, what is the best place? Is that Amazon, or I'll put the link in the show notes, obviously, but
Yes, all my books are on Amazon. They're on Kindle. My publisher, collectiveinc.com, and an autograph copy you can get on my website or sign up for a reading if you're interested. Soulvisions.net. You will not get an autograph copy on Amazon, although I cannot beat, even as the author, I cannot beat their prices. I just can't. So, um, but this is a simply written book. It's nothing that you have to fear, like, oh, gee, I'm not going to understand that. I have been guided to write things very simply and straightforwardly because knowledge that people cannot understand or is that confusing becomes useless. So the channel for that should make it as clear as possible. And that's what I've attempted to do in all of my books.
Well, I read The Art of Sensing, and I can back you up on that. It is, and there's so much more in the book that we didn't even talk about in this episode. We addressed more, I think, on your first journey with me, and that episode is called "Insights into Intuition," and we went much more into like your birth charts, astrology, and things of that nature. It's all in the book. It has so much great information to teach you how to lean into your own internal knowingness and get yourself on your right path, your soul journey. Everybody has one here. And the sooner that you start stepping into your path, the sooner you're going to feel more in alignment. You're going to feel more in the flow, as we were saying. You're going to see things happen and unravel in your life in ways that you couldn't have possibly imagined. So pick up her book, gang. I will put it in the show notes. I'll put your website, soulvisions.net, in the show notes as well if people want to reach out to you for a reading. And with that, Carol, I'd like to thank you for coming on the Fate podcast. You're always welcome on the show, my friend.
Thank you, Christy. My pleasure.
Thank you too. Alrighty, gang. That is a wrap on this episode of Fate. We will see you next week. Journey well, everyone. Bye bye. And that is a wrap on this episode of Fate, from atheism to enlightenment. I want to thank Carol for coming on the show again and spending her time with me. She is a delight, and she is a powerful psychic medium. So I will be putting her website and her book, The Art of Sensing, in the show notes. If you feel the need to figure out what your soul path is, or maybe reach out to a loved one who has passed over, she would be a great resource to tap into, guys, and figure those types of things out. Um, but I'm glad we did a show again on tapping into one's own intuition, um, an inner knowing that we all have. I am still on the road myself of trying to really have the discernment between my egoic mind and my higher self, my inner knowing. It's a practice that you have to get into, and it also, I think, relies a lot on trust, which we didn't talk about in the show, but it really does. You have to kind of trust after a while that you are listening to your inner soul, your inner self. It's a practice, and I feel like it's one that many of us are in need of doing now, especially in these times where I feel like the human consciousness in general is looking outside of themselves so much for things that you can absolutely gain if you only turn within. And I'm learning that lesson just as much as I am telling you about that lesson. And I often say things on this show because I'm experiencing them myself in real time. I am going through my own expansion and learning and growing and feeling into who I am and how to navigate the world now. The world, I feel, is increasingly changing at such a rapid pace in a direction that I don't think any of us have really um, been able to understand. And um, my absolute best advice to anyone out there is to remind you is to what you focus on grows. I know there's a lot to focus on out there that is chaos, that is um, frightening, that is makes you angry, and it's all valid, all of it. but I would just suggest you try to affect the global consciousness in a different way and see if you get different results. Because I don't see anything changing based on the level of worry, the level of anger, or the level of hatred that you have. I don't see that benefiting you or the global consciousness. We are all connected. My vibration is putting out a certain resonance, and so is yours. And it matters. Your resonance, your vibration, your intention, your words, your thoughts are all affecting the energy around you. It's why transcendental meditation works. When you get a bunch of people together focusing on love, peace, uh, harmony, they see the crime rates going down. They see other beautiful things happening out there in areas of the world that are riddled with war and crime. And it's because we're all connected, and what you think on grows. So think good, think peace, think love, think joy, and be in the present moment and pay attention to your inner knowing, your inner pulls. What's pulling you in a direction? What feels good? It helps. That's my tip of the day. Anyways, gang, I'm going to leave it there. You can follow me on Instagram. F.A.T.E. podcast. I'm out there. I'm out there a little bit. Gonna get out there a little bit more. Anyways, with that, guys, we will see you next week on Fate, from atheism to enlightenment. I hope you keep journeying with me, and we will raise the consciousness of this planet. That is the train that we are on. Journey well, everyone. Bye-bye.